So to get right into it, we have Miss Jennifer Carty. How are you doing? And welcome to the program.
Hi, Ralph. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. To first start, you were part of history, I would say, in terms of your role at the Chamber of Commerce, where you came in with the first all female or woman executive board. And to start out, how has that been?
Oh, it's been great. It's been great. I mean, I enjoy working with women. I think it's great to see women take up such important seats now. I'm not saying that we're better than men, by no means, but we have sometimes a different way of working, especially when it comes to like organizational skills and getting certain things done. So that's been quite enjoyable, I must admit.
Okay, great. And what would you say is a motivation, for you running to be on the Chamber's board? And
well, that's an interesting question because I actually do have a really good answer for that.
Okay.
Before I've ever had in my mind to run in the chamber elections, I was working at a company, a liquor distribution company, a large one here on the island, and I was representing a lot of large brands like, Moet, Hennessy, Stolichnaya, really big brands. And basically what they would do is they would give you marketing budget, like really large marketing budgets. I'm talking sometimes like, millions of guilders. But you have to show to them how you intend to spend it. So they want a plan and they want to see, for instance, okay, how do you intend to, what's your strategy for bars and restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. So I needed a lot of data in order to make those reports. I needed to know how much bars and restaurants there were without having to take a walk around the island myself and figure that out. So I would often find myself calling the chamber and asking for this information, which technically they're supposed to provide because it's public information. And when you're asking for such data, you are supposed to be able to pay for it.
Gotcha.
And I would always get some stories like, yeah, we're working on it, but the end result was that we never really ended up getting it. And now being in the chamber, I understand why. But that for me was a huge motivation because lack of data is very detrimental for a country and, for businesses just as well. They need that information in order to draw certain conclusions and make plans. And without that, I think that it's very scary. So that was my main motivation to join.
Okay. You mentioned a big D word because that's something I was definitely planning to ask later on.
Sure.
I think in addition to what you said, what's key is also correct data.
Yes.
Because sometimes, by no choice, you're kind of forced to work with what you have.
Absolutely.
And, we may see data maybe, let's say, from a central bank, IMF report or whatever, and then you ask yourself, really? So I could imagine how much of a motivator that was. What would you say are some of your main goals when you came in as president of the board?
Well, when I came in, it was definitely cleaning up the database.
Okay.
But we had, as an outsider, you have no idea what that actually entails because cleaning up the database isn't coming in there and saying, oh, Radio Shack, but they closed 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Let me just remove them. That's actually illegal. At the time, we were not allowed to do that by law. There's a procedure that you had to follow. And it isn't until now with the recent law changes which we are able to clean up the database and deregister businesses are in default. Now that we have that power to finally do a mass cleanup. So, just to give you a little bit of reference, as of recently, the chamber had 28,000 registered businesses in its database. Now, I can assure you there are not 28,000 businesses operating right now on St. Maarten. So if we were using that figure or we were giving that figure to government or central bank, that's a highly inaccurate figure to use to draw any kind of conclusions. So, but it wasn't necessarily the fault of chamber that the database was inaccurate because we did not have the mandate to just remove somebody without their written permission.
I see.
Yeah.
And what would that process been like if it...
Well, before the law change, that would have entailed going to court. Now, we've, in our preliminary exercise with the deregistration campaign, we've identified over 9,000 businesses being flat out in default. So that's 28,000 minus those 9,000. And that's without diving in deep. That would have meant, before the law change, taking all 9,000 people individually to court and doing an entire court procedure in order to have them removed.
Yeah.
Now, you could imagine how costly and how not time effective that would have been.
And so as far as deregistering businesses that are in default, you're looking at a certain amount of years? And
yes. So the law stipulates that it's an adjustment to the Civil Code Book 2. And there's, I think, 4 key points, with the two most important obviously being that you must have been in good standing at the chamber, meaning paying your registration fee, because by law you are mandated to do that.
Okay.
And aside from that, it's also making sure that your information is accurate. Sometimes we still find businesses in the database that have a missing director or the address is incomplete. These are, by law, you are required to have all that information up to date and accurate. So if it hasn't been changed in 10 plus years, there's a high chance that it's inaccurate information, and it's your duty to make sure that that's accurate.
Okay, got you. And could you share a bit more on the importance of data, especially at a time like this where we're looking to push to even digitize our economy, digitize this almost every civil process at this moment?
Well, it's important for a number of reasons. Something as far as, on a national level, when we're talking about, like in the time of the SSRP, when we were in the middle of a crisis and we needed to know really quickly, okay, how many businesses do we need to financially support? That data would have been crucial. Unfortunately, we helped as much as we could. There's certain ways that we could kind of make some estimates based on the registrants that have been most active over the years. But a lot of times it's not an accurate figure. So on a national level, whether you're dealing with stakeholders like central bank who's working on their reports, government needs to make certain conclusions or calculations for planning. That's extremely crucial to have an accurate number. For economic diversification, it's really important to know, okay, in which sectors do we have an oversaturation, or are we unrepresented? Also, when it comes to investors, both on the smallest of scale to even large international investors, it's important to understand the economic landscape and say, hey, I have some money that I want to invest. Where should I best invest that money? And that's where you should be able to come into the chamber and say, well, we have a lot of shoe stores on the island. Maybe I better open a bakery. And that's the kind of data that's very important. Because what you will find here is everybody, like right now, one of the highest, fastest growing sectors is the retail, the supermarket industry. Everyone's getting into retail in supermarket, mini supermarkets, grocery stores. At one point, do you say, okay, we've now reached an oversaturation based on the square mile size of the island. And these are kind of data that should help guide government in making certain decisions.
That's true.
When it comes to economic diversification, saying like, hey, we really need we're now noticing we have a gap in this industry, so we're now going to start giving incentives for that industry. So that's where it's very important. I'll give you another great example. Right now, a lot of small businesses or businesses in general are busy with trying to acquire funding from the NRPB. It's really important that when you're doing your business model that you understand your market.
Correct.
And after, having some conversations with NRPB, it turned out that a lot of people did not know how to complete that exercise. They would say, oh, I have no competitors on Maarten. And that was absolutely inaccurate, but maybe they honestly didn't know. So we need somewhere that we need to be able to have our data as accurate as possible so that anybody can walk in at any given time and understand what's going on in the economy.
So I understand that basically you're now doing the groundwork. It's like excavation basically. So when that is done, how is the chamber looking to put together that data in digestible form, whether it's on your website
Well, the great news is, and I'm so proud to announce, is that we've actually already started doing that.
Okay, great.
While we cannot give assessments of our data on a whole right now, what we've been doing is keeping statistics on the data of, like, let's say this year and last year.
Gotcha.
So for instance, if you go on our new website now, stmartinchamberofcommerce.sx, and you go to navigate to statistics, you will find quarterly reports and also annual reports on what was the growest sector in terms of type of business that opened, sole proprietor or NV or BV. All of that is there.
Okay.
You could see growth. You could see growth by sector. So
nice.
I must really commend our new director, Mr. Jude Houston. He's been really working on this, on making sure that the statistics of at least what we've been keeping tabs on since his tenure is reflected on the website, and that's public knowledge. Anybody can navigate to that right now and download those reports.
Okay. I like what you said, particularly as it relates to digitizing things as well, because one of the things we had during the lockdown period, the beginning of the pandemic, was a whole lot of talk of the digital economy and whatnot, but we have barriers, So so I know that the chamber, for example, can give government advice, and government can request advice from you guys, and from y'all's standpoint, what are the ways? What can we do to remove those barriers?
Well, it's a very complex situation, and it isn't a quick fix. It's very complex in the sense that we, as like regular civilians, we don't know the extent of the situation.
Yeah.
But it has a lot to do with our laws, updating the FATF laws, because I'm guessing when you're saying like online banking, you're talking also internationally, right?
Correct.
Not only locally.
Correct.
We know that, for instance, the central bank well, I hope that they're still on track for October. They were going to finally launch the instant payments between
correct.
local banks. I understood there were some delays there, but that's already a step in the right direction when it comes to, facilitating trade that happens online, because that gives people a sense of comfort of
correct.
knowing that, the money is instantly deposited. When it comes to international payments, that's a whole different ballgame, because now we're talking about external stakeholders such as PayPal and other payment gateways on that kind of level that may or may not want to do business with St. Maarten based on our risk, or we're known in the news as having a high level of corruption and fraud and money laundering. And these are things that we need to take very, very, very serious.
Correct.
So I think that these are stuff that Parliament needs to finalize, these FATF laws, and give these companies the guarantee or the assurance or the comfort of knowing that, hey, doing business in St. Maarten is actually not as risky as you may think it would be. So that's definitely the advice that the chamber is giving, that we need to start putting that pressure on those responsible for making sure that these laws are finalized.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned Parliament, because I do remember, I think it was earlier this year, you guys had a meeting at Parliament where you made a presentation and everything.
Yeah.
And
it's quite unfortunate because the sense of urgency is not the same for everyone.
Yeah.
And especially, and I don't want to make this like a generational gap thing, but our parents have absolutely no problem with doing trade with the payment methods that they've been using for 20, 30 plus years. You try telling a young millennial or a generation Gen Z that are now, they're now also very entrepreneurial thanks to social media. You try telling them that they can't accept money from somebody in the US who wants to buy their digital guide or, wants to, any kind of digital service, they will not understand, And I suffered from that frustration as well, because, with my business, I also have an international clientele. So, I was out there looking for all types of means to see, okay, what platforms do the banks offer? Because they do offer solutions. It just so happens that they're extremely expensive. So it's very costly. So for a small business, it's not an easy solution. And if you're talking about a larger business, they could easily afford that. But small businesses, they cannot give, let's say, I know one of the banks here requires a 50% hold on your annual estimated sales. Oh. That's impossible for a small business. So these are some of the obstacles that especially those that want to do online trade are facing.
And so what would you say some recommendations that the chamber came up with in terms of making the ease of doing business, even just starting as a regular civilian, possible?
Well, the ease of doing business right now is based on information. You ask anybody right now, anybody, even myself up to recently, how to open a business, the actual step-by-steps, everyone will tell you something different.
It's true.
Everyone will tell you something different. And the procedure has become so complex and so complicated and so expensive. If you want to do it independently, it can take sometimes up to a year before you get all of your paperwork done to establish a business. And for me, that's simply unacceptable. It's unacceptable. what you see a lot of people doing now, especially in the case of opening an NV, is that they just go to a notary and they have the notary do the entire process for them.
Yeah.
The notary has their connections. Unfortunately, you got to spend a couple $1,000 before you can have that established. And maybe not everyone can afford that. So when it comes from the chamber side, kind of what we're doing right now is, and what we can do, is give as much information as possible. With the webinars, that's what we've been doing.
Yes.
So how to start a business, what's the correct way to start a business, what's the fastest way to start a business, what's the most affordable way to start a business. And then we involved all of the stakeholders in our webinars as well. And we're hoping through knowledge, we can make that procedure a lot easier. That doesn't necessarily remove the cost of opening a business, because I find opening a business in St. Maarten is too high. And if we want to promote entrepreneurship, even if on the smallest scale, we need to find a way to make that more affordable.
Yeah.
One of the things that I championed, but not everyone agreed with me, and I understand, was relaxing the sole proprietor requirements. Right now, to be able to open a sole proprietor, which is the fastest way that you could open a business, because you don't have to go through the notary and all of that, and the cheapest would be to open a sole proprietor. But unfortunately, you have to be Antillian born, not to have a Dutch passport. You have to be Antillian born. Now, I feel like that gap is becoming smaller and smaller, especially if you look at the diversification of people on the island.
Correct.
So, we say we want to protect the locals, and I strongly believe that we should reserve, certain key jobs for and licenses for locals.
Correct.
But if our economy as a whole is not doing well and we cannot diversify, who are we really helping? Are we helping the locals? Because now what happens is those who cannot afford an NV or a BV, or they do not meet the requirements for sole proprietor, they either run a cash business and don't contribute to taxes.
Correct.
Or they have somebody open it for them and they just do everything under the table.
Yeah, and which is what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah,
because then you're saying local, but even, let's say you're born on friend side, are you not considered a local?
Exactly. And there have been cases where, like for instance, one of our fellow board members, he just happened to be born on the French side because of a medical complication. And now he cannot open a sole proprietor on the Dutch side.
Yeah, at least without, you need to get a business, you get a business license first. And
so you have, so there's it's possible. Let me put a disclaimer there. It is possible, but it's just a much longer route.
Exactly.
And a more costlier route, because now you have to pay a business license as well.
Exactly. So to kind of go on a personal side, you're the head of the chamber, well, the board specifically, and you still run your businesses. And so how has that been? How do you manage? And
do you see the bags under my eyes?
Gucci bags?
It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy, and I am a perfectionist, and I like to give everything my all. So when I struggle to find a balance and I feel like I'm slacking a little bit on one, it's a bit tough for me mentally. But sometimes I say, like, I try to be realistic with the time. My term at the chamber was 3 years. This is my last year. So, and the presidency is a 1-year term. So at the end of this year, I have a decision to make on whether I want to run again or if I want to leave.
Okay.
It's not an easy decision to make.
Yeah, I can understand.
But this year, I was very realistic with what I could achieve within a year.
Yeah.
And for me, what was really important was the structural issues that we needed to fix within the chamber. This deregistration procedure was stipulated by the law, and we just had to execute it based on the law. So that was quite straightforward. But there were a lot of other issues inside the chamber where we needed to make crucial decisions on a strategic level in order to facilitate a cleaner database. And one example that I will give you, and you will be seeing this coming forward in the news very shortly, was inactivation status. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it's basically a status that the chamber offered to businesses that wanted to temporarily pause their business. They would go into the chamber and they would request a document that would state that they were inactive. And they would take that document to the tax office, and then they weren't required to file TOT, but then they were required to file profit tax. And then they were just basically a dormant business.
Okay.
While it was created with all the good intentions, because, we want to alleviate the burden from business owners, because the chamber fee is, for some people, 250 guilders a year, it did kind of create some problems of its own.
Yeah.
it not being
imagine.
time-bound
Yeah.
means that now we had inactive businesses in our database for 10 plus years.
Wow.
You know, we have businesses that are in our database since the 90s that have been inactive.
Wow.
And what is most scary about that situation is that these figures is what the tax office uses to calculate tax compliance. So we've always been talking about a 30% tax compliance.
Yeah.
For years,
Yeah.
I've been hearing, St. Maarten only has a 30% tax compliance.
Correct.
How accurate really is that? If, you know, the tax office is using the figures that are inaccurate. You know, obviously they'd make some, I'm not saying that they don't use their own data to make certain conclusions, but they're driven a lot by the number of businesses that are on the island. That's how we deduce how many people are paying taxes. And, you know, it is only unless we clean up that database and get an accurate idea, then can we say, okay, well, this is really what tax compliance is on the island. So, and I think people have to remember that when you're registered at the chamber, we are literally mandated by law to keep your name in that registry. You're paying basically rent to keep your name safe and registered so that we know, okay, this business is operating. So if you're taking up space in this registry and you're no longer active, you know, it has a horrible effect for everyone. So the chamber has made a decision as of recent to get rid of the activation status, which means as of effective immediately, businesses can no longer request that. So you'll have to, if you want to stay as a legal entity, you have to continue paying your chamber fees, and you have to let chamber know, listen, keep my business registered. I'm an active business. That could mean that you may close your doors for a little bit, but you have to remain active within the registry.
Gotcha.
And then we're going to give a period for those who are inactive right now. I think they have until the end of the year to decide on whether they're going to change or not. And that will just help force people to make a decision. Like, okay, you know, you haven't had your store open in 10 years.
The accountability and ethics of the situation too.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is, aside from the deregistration campaign, another obstacle that we had to overcome in order to get a cleaner database. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So another note on another personal note rather than is something that has definitely become more popular is the talk on mental health. Why generally as a population, but I think anyone in a leadership position, especially someone who owns a business, you know, may tend to overlook their own mental health, especially when you're dealing with employees, maybe clients, persons not paying you on time, the difficulty in itself of, you know, just setting up your business, dealing with the tax office and so forth. So what do you like to see on that?
Well, mental health is so real, and I have been very, very vocal about mental health. I myself have suffered. I've been very public with, you know, suffering with mental health. I suffered from crippling anxiety for years. Wow. That started a few years ago, and at the time I didn't know how to handle it. So when you started getting these panic attacks and feeling like you're going to pass out, you think you're going to die. So it was one of the most uncomfortable feelings I've ever gone through. Luckily, I was able to, you know, get some help and figure out how to deal with it. Now I've reached to the point where I can sense when it's going to come on and I can handle it. And, you know, anxiety could lead to depression. So it's something that you really need to keep in check. And aside from that, we're living in really difficult times. When I open up about my mental health struggles, other people open about theirs.
Correct.
Yesterday, I had a business meeting, and at the end of the meeting, we just were talking about mental health and what they overcame and what I overcame. And when you see the person, a very strong, confident person, you would never think that they were suffering through that. And my only comment I made to her after the conversation, because it was female, I was like, I really hope that men have this level of conversation as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Because if we look at the statistics, especially as of recent,
the
suicide rate is higher among young males. And, you know, we can make some speculations that may have to do with, you know, the support that they're getting and what they're able to discuss. You know, we kind of grew up in a society where men don't cry and men don't talk about their feelings.
And whatnot.
But coming back to, I guess, why you asked this question, you know, we're living in very difficult times. My businesses also, you know, suffered immensely from the pandemic. And, you know, it is extremely important to understand that everything that is happening to you or to your business is temporary.
Yes.
And there's solutions for it. And I think the goal should be to find a way on, okay, assess your problem, assess what solution you could create, and then see how you can implement that solution, whether it be by yourself or with the help of somebody that you trust. You need a support system. I cannot stress enough how important a support system is. It is the only thing sometimes that helps people get out of those really, really tough moments. Whether that is your mother, your father, your friend, your sister, your brother, somebody that you absolutely trust, open up to them and let them know, hey, I need help. And coming back to, dealing with employees, and I believe in full transparency. Letting your employees know, like, hey, this is how much money is going in, this is how much money that's going out. This is the situation. We need to work on improving our revenues. Can you assist? What can we do? I'm trying my best to keep the business afloat, but I may need to make adjustments. Keeping them informed along the way helps a lot, especially if you pick the right people for your business. They will understand. If you find someone with the right morals and values, they will understand. And transparency is key. Another thing that I firmly believe in is mental health days. Everyone has a bad day. And that is just a fact. And I don't believe in the whole clock in, clock out system. I believe get the work done that you need to do. I don't believe in you have to be there at 9. I don't believe that you have to leave there at 5. If one day you're struggling mentally, take a mental health day. I really firmly believe in that. And even in my business, I've been adopting kind of the guidelines that Microsoft uses, like unlimited vacation days and, mental health days, because it's more of an agreement that you have with your staff. And if you feel like they're not taking advantage of you, then you can help them as well when in difficult times or if they want to take some time to spend with their family. So I have a very much goal-oriented approach as opposed to clock in, clock out approach.
Correct. Okay. So we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Sure.
Stay tuned. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the news behind the news right here on Mix 94.7 FM. And I am joined here with the president of the board of the Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Jennifer Carty. And in case you may have missed it, we talked about a whole lot of stuff, particularly relating to data, the ease of doing business on St. Maarten, and the works that the Chamber is currently engaged in. And when we last left off, we spoke on mental health and the ways in which we can, as entrepreneurs particularly, can simply take care of themselves. Because at the end of the day, to quote a old Caribbean proverb, empty bag can't stand up. So one of the things that I thought of when you last spoke was even in ways in which we can transform our society. Talking about the clock in, clock out system. Because if you think about it, it's also not family oriented. Because I personally, I've read a few articles, and I think it's a strong argument that even the 5-day work week system can be reduced to 4 days if the goals of the business is accomplished. So
absolutely. And there's a lot of research to back that up. There's a wonderful book that was written about it. I can't recall the name right now, but I will have to give that to you. Maybe we can add it in the comment section after when this is posted.
Okay.
But if you take a look at the Scandinavian countries, I always say those people, they have it figured out. They've gone over to I think in one of the countries, they've gone over to the 4-day work week. But also the maternity leave and the paternity leave is extremely long. And the research that they had to back that up was that having a mother present, especially in the formative years of a child, will in the long term pay off for the society. So we're basically reducing the chance of that child becoming a delinquent. By just having the mother stay maybe a year, I think is a year paid, and I think another year, a year paid on maternity leave, and the following year is unpaid. But I think you can think up to 3 years in the Scandinavian countries for maternity leave, and they don't do anything just based off of assumptions. They have research to back that up, and I think it's extremely forward thinking to say, like, listen, we're gonna do this right now. We might feel it a little bit, but it's going to pay off rewardingly in the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And I just think that vision, that foresight is incredible.
Yeah, because we have, I would say now in our culture, I wouldn't say it was our culture before, this hustle, just work till you drop mentality. And it simply boils down to, making sacrifices where, although sacrifices are important in several cases, but you don't get time to spend time with your family. Yeah. And even in terms of employees, they barely get to see the children. You maybe see them a few hours in the morning and then late at night, then everybody goes to sleep. So it's like, how do you get, so that's just a social context related thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I understand why in St. Maarten a lot of business owners are hesitant to make that switch. And that's because they don't have the trust with their employees. Do you really know your employees? Do you have a bond with them? Correct. Do you understand them? Do you know that they won't take advantage of you if they're working from home? And one of the ways to combat that is goal-oriented work. This is what you need to do and have it done. Please have it done by this and this deadline. And this is what you will be evaluated on. Then it doesn't matter if somebody takes 20 hours to do it or 5 hours. Correct. Once it's up to standard and they meet their deadlines. And I think we may need to, if we want to see improvements in that area, start moving over to a goal-oriented work environment and also doing evaluations.
Okay. So one of the things I know the Chamber for many years have been vocal about is tax reform, and we even see where recently there have been a presentation made at Parliament. It's part of the country package and so forth. Yeah. And so what is Chamber's current position where that's concerned and the way it should be?
I cannot make a broad statement on behalf of the entire board at this time. To be honest, with all of the goals that the Chamber has ongoing right now, a lot of the tax reform has not really been something that we've been heavily discussing as of right now. Okay. I know the previous board spent a lot of time on that and gave a lot of recommendations. Okay. I just know from an entrepreneurial perspective that it is absolutely needed. And I find it quite unfortunate that it has been something that has been in discussion for so long. Yeah. And then up to today, still no indication of which direction we're going to go in. There have been so many knowledgeable reports written about this and studies done. And we, from what I understood, we also have a tax committee on St. Maarten that was established, an independent tax committee with lots of tax advisors. You have to ask Mr. Marcel Gums about that. He told me that one day. He back in his days, they comprised a tax committee consisting of a lot of tax lawyers. I don't know if they're still active today. But, tax reform is not something new. We've been talking about it for many years. And it's funny because actually the really high turnover tax of 5%, it was based on a recommendation of my father, Mr. Glenn Carty, who was the president of the Chamber shortly after Lewis in the 90s, that made a recommendation to government to temporarily increase the TOT from 3% to 5%. Temporarily. We are now in 2021, and that 5% is still there. And it's a very heavy burden. Yeah. If you look at the tax structures in the entire world, and I may be wrong, but I think we came out a third or fourth highest in the world, especially if you're taking the TOT in consideration with the profit tax. Exactly. All my business mentors in the States, when we were going through my financials, they were like, "What? Yeah. You can't be serious." Yeah. He's like, "You're working for the government." Yeah. And it's an extreme burden. And the fact that, a lot of people say, okay, well, the turnover tax is extremely high. And that it is. I would have loved to see it more in the 2021, which is more comparable to countries in the rest of the world. But it's really the 5% TOT per month on gross revenue that is the killer. Because gross revenue is also taking a chunk out of what you paid for the cost of the service or the product that you purchased, that you're reselling. And if you really do that exercise, and I've talked about this so often on Facebook, I've been really vocal about this. After all is said and done, you can easily pay up to 50% in taxes when you take into consideration the total value of the TOT you're paying on a monthly basis as long as your profit tax. And it is just unfortunate because what you see here is a lot of businesses then force themselves not to be profitable because they don't want to pay profit tax, although they've paid a lot of TOT.
Correct.
So if you force yourself not to be profitable, so you try to break even,
correct,
or maybe have a little bit of a loss, what does that mean then for your business? How can you reinvest? How can you grow your business? How can
the nation thrive overall?
Yeah, we're not enabling our businesses to be profit minded.
Correct.
Whereas, all of the mentorship programs I've been in the U.S., that's all they talk about, profit first. We're going to work on profit first. We're going to calculate how much profit you want to make, and then we're going to reverse engineer that to see how much you need to sell. And then you come up with a strategy based on that. But if here your goal is to not generate a profit, and I'm not saying something I shouldn't, because this is widespread knowledge. Everyone knows that. They try to pay as little profit tax as possible. I have serious concerns for the health of the businesses that want, where how can we reinvest?
And this is sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I would say this is a personal statement, and I'm putting words in your mouth.
Absolutely.
But basically, it's a lazy approach of governing because you're just counting on businesses to feed government.
And I understand the fear of government, and I understand the position that they're in, especially right now. We are in a very, very horrible financial situation. So they're relying on that 5% every month.
There were times where we weren't, though. That's the...
Exactly.
Yeah.
But right now, the thought of government to reduce that right now it's scary because how will they be able to make ends meet? They're relying on that.
Without additional loans and
exactly.
conditions, etc.
So do I expect a change within the short term? Unfortunately not, because of the financial crisis that we're in right now. But I do think that we need to really strongly, when we're talking about economic diversification and inspiring new businesses to open, we have to take the tax structure into consideration because it's killing businesses.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. So to get back to something else with the chamber, I know that you guys made in a presentation, you spoke of the Pelican Park.
Yes.
Can you give us any details or updates on that? And for those who may not know, what is it?
Yeah. So the Pelican Park is a name that was given by the chamber. It's not, I don't believe it's an official name as yet, but perhaps maybe it is. But we call it the Pelican Park. But it's actually an economic service center. And it is a project that we entered into agreement with government in 2015.
Okay.
We presented the plans in Parliament earlier this year, and I think it's now, you could see a beautiful rendering of it also on the website, on the homepage of the Chamber of Commerce when you go on there. And basically, this was a project that the government mandated or contracted the chamber to do, or gave them the responsibility to develop. And a lot of people have the misconception that, it's the chamber building. It could not be further from the truth. It's a huge 3-building development with more park space and out like greenery, like something that St. Maarten has never had, actually, like a real park area with a monument, and it's really beautiful architecture. You have to take a look at it. But the chamber part of that, so where the chamber offices are intended to be, is actually a very, very, very small portion of it on one of the floors of one of the buildings.
Okay, gotcha.
So we're talking about 95% of the remaining space is for offices, so entrepreneurial space. So we are talking about rentals, we're talking about lease to own, and we're talking about own outright, so for sale. And the idea is also to have really large spaces for conventions and for events. And
gotcha.
There's still a lot of space that hasn't been earmarked as yet, that we are in discussions with stakeholders to see, like, okay, what is needed on the island. But it also has a huge, what you call like a street vendor area.
Gotcha.
That's very beautiful. And the idea is to bring back life to Phillipsburg, to increase the property value of the Ring Road, to really have something like, an area where, business owners can sit down, have business meetings, have lunch, have discussions. So
understand. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
So it's not the chamber project or the chamber building.
Okay.
It's an economic service center that government allowed the chamber to develop. And I must say, when I came in, the project was already heavily underway. And I must say it was one of the most transparent procedures in the development of a building of that magnitude that I've ever seen. From the get-go, everything was done with a bidding process, and companies came in, and we hired a professional company to do a bidding process for the architectural drawings, for the development plans, for everything. So it is really, really great to see something that is going to give so much added value to St. Maarten, and that was done on such a transparent manner. I was really proud of that.
Okay. And an additional thing I saw the Chamber proposed or started was Export Ready project. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, so Export Ready was something that was being done together with Herveo, and it was multifaceted. A lot of it had to do also with like business matchmaking, so finding companies that would use our services here in St. Maarten and vice versa. So it was basically using the chamber in order to make that link between, let's say, European businesses and St. Maarten businesses. The idea this year was to take it a step further to seeing how we could use information to empower businesses to prepare themselves to become export ready. Of course, there's a lot of challenges that come with that as well. Like, for instance, outbound shipping, TOT, that's something that we're talking about right now. You know, a lot of businesses are being charged TOT even though that they're exporting to a foreign country. And what happens is that they're now competing with other global companies, and they're no longer competitive because
Which
of
tend
the
to be subsidized
5%.
even from their countries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these are some of the stuff that we're working on, and we're trying to have that necessary pressure on government to pay attention to, because I firmly believe, and this is me, Jennifer, my position is that we are heavily underplaying the
Export.
The export market.
Okay, gotcha.
I think that is a huge way to diversify our economy. But we need to enable people with the tools. Outbound shipping here is, you hardly ever hear about, you know, places where you can go and mail stuff out or ship stuff out on a large scale or even a small scale. Comes back to the whole international payments for people that have digital services. We need to start focusing on export, because I believe firmly that that is the low-hanging fruit for economic diversification.
Gotcha.
Because right now you have a small pool of people that are just trying to sell to each other.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to find a way to open that up to the global market.
Yeah.
Because any graphic designer, any accountant, anybody that offers any type of digital service can sell online tomorrow.
And even products.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyone right now in the marine industry or in the, you know, you name it, can export internationally, but we need to find ways to allow them to be competitive.
Yeah, so in essence, gets man past just the sun, sea, and sand. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, we just have about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
So is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I think we covered quite a lot. I think your questions were spot on. I hope I was able to give an insight into what was going on, what's going on behind the chamber. We're heavily busy with the database cleanup. This might take a while because, as you know, we're doing it in portions of 500 because it's a very
it's a lot.
tedious process, having to go through and verify and make sure that they absolutely are in default. Yeah. Because you don't want to publish names incorrectly.
Yeah.
And
something that just came to mind then is actually that y'all also lose revenue on that.
Yeah, you lose revenue on it, and chamber is not subsidized by government. I know that was that was mentioned a couple of weeks ago in the courtroom. Yeah. But chamber is not subsidized by government, so we are dependent on the registration fees. But all of these undertakings, so cleaning up the database, it is not motivated primarily by revenue.
Yeah, I understand.
It's motivated by cleaning up the database and being able to give accurate information.
So to have a fresh beginning. Yeah. Okay.
I'm excited for that.
Great. So thank you so much, Jennifer, and to our listeners and viewers, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Be sure to catch the next episode of The News Behind the News. Take care, and we'll see you again.